Fountain-like habit. In this training, we're going to prune a plant with a fountain-like habit. To do that, we've selected this sea green Pfister juniper just outside of one of our residence halls at BYU. At a glance, you'll notice that this particular juniper has a number of issues. It was planted about 3.5 years ago as of the time of the making of this video. And as far as we're aware, the only pruning cuts that have been made since then are the heading cuts used to take the branches off the sidewalk. We also have some spacing concerns in this bed, where some of this plant's branches have begun to overlap a bit with the branches of some of its neighboring plants. Now, in order to make this video, we've pruned back those branches to help distinguish this plant from its surroundings. But know that the branches were overlapping before we prepped for this video training. Moreover, according to the Missouri Botanical Gardens website, this particular species of juniper is estimated to reach a height of 4 to 6 feet and a spread of 6 to 8 feet at maturity. As you can see here, the distance from the ground to the bottom of the window pane is 3 feet 9 inches, and the distance from the center of the plant to the sidewalk is 2 feet 9 inches. That said, if this juniper were to only grow as big as it's expected to grow, we would expect to have clearance issues with the window and the sidewalk within 5 to 10 years. And that's when growing conditions are ideal. However, this particular juniper, which only needs occasional watering, is on the same watering schedule as a plant bed full of winged euonymus, coral beauty cotoneaster, and Walloomba magic carpet spirea that need more frequent watering, especially in this dry Provo, Utah climate. And because of the watering schedule this plant bed is on, this plant, after only 3.5 years, has already reached a height of 10 feet and a spread of 11 feet 6 inches. That said, chances are we will likely continue to struggle against the genetic growth rate of this plant and the hard boundaries and overwatering of this situation for some time. And so what do we do about this kind of a situation? At this point, we'll pass on that kind of information to our landscape architect and our tree and shrub installation crew and our gardening maintenance crew. And in the meantime, we'll do the best we can with the design we've got. Well, that's plenty of information in the way of goals and special considerations to get us started. That said, to prune this plant, we'll begin by reducing the size of this plant, which will improve visibility, create space between plants, and create space between the plant and the wall. To do that, we are going to get out our reciprocal saw and remove some of our larger stems first. We'll begin by reducing this stem here back to a lateral branch. Admittedly, this isn't a good cut. It's not the cut we would prefer to make. But given our limited number of choices, because of the hard boundaries we're working with and because of what others have already removed, this is about the best we can do. Even so, here's the finished cut, and here's the result. We'll continue to thin and reduce the height by removing this stem here. And here's the finished cut, and here's the result. Lots more thinning to do, and so we'll remove this stem here and continue to bring down the height. And here's the result. We'll continue to thin by reducing this stem here. And here's the result. We'll get out our reciprocal saw again and reduce this stem back to this strong lateral. And here's the result. We'll make another reduction cut here. And here's the result. We'll reduce this stem back to this strong lateral here. And here's the result. You can see from our aerial view here that the stems are not equidistant from the center of the plant, and so we're going to reduce this stem here. Again, this is not an appropriate cut, it's a heading cut. This is not a strong lateral, but given our choices, this is about as good as we can do. Even so, here's the finished cut, and here's the result. These stems are growing over the sidewalk. We'll remove them back to strong laterals here, here, and here, and here's the result. You can see from the white end here we've already reduced this stem once, but to help balance out the plant we need to reduce it further. Again, this is not an appropriate cut. We're not pruning back to a strong lateral. This is a heading cut, but given our choices, this is about as good as we can do. And here's the result. You can see from our aerial view here, we still have some boundary issues with stems growing over the sidewalk, and we want to work on the radial spacing of the plant. So we'll remove this stem back to this point here. And here's the result. We'll continue to reduce the height by reducing this stem here. You'll notice how twisted this cluster of stems is. We actually had to make 2 passes at it because the space between the stems was so tight. Even so, here's the finished cut here, and here's the result. We'll reduce this stem back to this side branch here, which is a little smaller ratio-wise than we would prefer. And here's the result. This stem is also growing over the sidewalk and we need to take it in bounds. There aren't any strong laterals to prune back to in this instance, again because of the hard boundaries and our limited options. And pruning back to a strong lateral would leave too much of a gap. And here's the result. We'll continue to reduce the height and the spread by making reduction cuts here, 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 and here. And here's the result. Unfortunately, this next cut is a heading cut. We need to continue to reduce the height and the spread of this stem here, and given the choices we have, this is about the best we can do. And here's the result. We'll continue to reduce the height and the spread by making reduction cuts here, and here, and here's the result. We'll continue to work on the radial spacing by removing these stems here, and here, and here's the result. This next cut is actually kind of a redo, if you will. We've already reduced this stem once, but as we got going, we realized that we needed to further reduce this stem to match the spread of the rest of the plant. And so we'll reduce the stem back to the next strong lateral here, and here's the result. We'll reduce this stem here, and here's the result. We'll continue to work on the radial spacing by removing this stem here, and we'll take this stem back to this heading cut we've inherited here, and here's the result. This cut is another redo. Similar to the last redo, as we got going, we realized that we needed to further reduce this stem to match the spread of the rest of the plant. And so we'll reduce this stem back to the next strong lateral here. And here's the result. We'll continue to reduce the height and the spread by making reduction cuts here, and here, and here's the result. We'll continue to work on the radial spacing and the spread by removing this stem here, and here's the result. From our aerial view, you can see that the outer edges of the canopy are not equidistant from the center of the plant. And so we'll continue to reduce the spread by making reduction cuts here, and here, and here's the result. We'll further reduce the spread by reducing these stems here, 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 and here, and here's the result. These next 3 cuts are not appropriate cuts, they are heading cuts. Even so, we'll do the best we can by reducing these stems here, here, and here, and here's the result. We'll continue to reduce the height and the spread by making reduction cuts here, and here, and here's the result. We'll continue to reduce the spread by removing these stems here, and here, and here's the result. And I think that's a good place to stop. In conclusion, we'll recap what we did. To review, you'll remember that when we first got started, we inherited some heading cuts that had been used to take some stems off the sidewalk. We had some spacing concerns where some of this plant's stems had begun to overlap a bit with some of the stems of its neighboring plants. We had some visibility issues with the plant obscuring the view from the window. The plant was imbalanced horizontally, vertically, and radially. And we had an overwatering issue. To help mitigate these issues, we cleaned up the heading cuts we inherited by pruning them back to strong laterals, or when that wasn't advisable, we pruned them back to within 1/4 inch above a node. We reduced the height of the plant by about 6 feet 3 inches. We reduced the spread of the plant, at its widest point, by about 5 feet 11 inches. We made about 40 thinning cuts, and we passed on our concerns about this plant being overwatered. This is the end of the fountain-like habit segment of our training video. Again, we realize that some of the pruning cuts made in this training segment were not ideal. And we realize that not everyone will have access to or a preference for the tools we used, but we hope that this training will give you a better idea of how we prune plants with a fountain-like habit at BYU.